it was fabulous. Okay, we'll start the meeting with apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Curtis.
And do we have any disclosures of interest? If anybody needs to... Yes, Councillor Cowshaw.
It's item 14, Chair. I will leave the meeting.
Thank you very much. Now I have to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of November and the extraordinary meeting held on the 10th of November. So if we can start with the meeting held on the 3rd of November. Is there any questions first? And if not, can I have somebody to propose that the minutes be accepted? And then somebody to, Councillor Coles, accept to propose, and Councillor Grocott to accept. Any other questions on those minutes? No? In which case we move on to the extraordinary meeting held on the 10th of November. Have we got anybody that will propose that 10th of November? Councillor Coles and Councillor Gist to second. Any questions on that one? In which case, then those minutes are accepted and confirmed as well. Moving on then to the next item on the agenda, which is there's several of these responses to notice of motion. And the first one is on the funding of neighbourhood development plans for parishes to replace the withdrawn central government financial support. Councillor Coucher, you're the lead member on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Neighbourhood development plans are extremely important and an important component of our planning infrastructure that we have as an authority. And I think it's very disappointing that government has decided to withdraw their financial support for that. Clearly, we are in the process of putting forward together the new South Warwickshire local plan, which will mean that many neighbourhood development plans will need reviewing in the next 2 to 3 years. And therefore, I think it will be very important that this council does financially support those town and parish councils that get involved in that process. This clearly is a budget item for next year. I think it'll be up to political groups to decide whether it's within their budgets or not. I'm sure as an administration we will be wanting to make a financial provision for that. So the recommendation we have here is that the proposal be considered as part of the council's budget setting process for 26-27 and that the notice of motion be supported.
Thank you very much indeed. I wrote an article on this one for the Herald, but it's on the front page of the District Council website. You know, the views on this one. It is valuable to find ways to keep people involved and participating in the places where they call home. And it is actually a duty under the Localism Act 2011 to support neighbourhood planning. It is regrettable that the funds from government have been withdrawn, but we've got to find ways to make sure that they remain supported. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, and for the Cabinet meeting, early season's greetings. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to do that. But I just want to say I'm delighted that the administration has accepted the motion brought forward by Conservative councillors Littlewood and Parry. The Deputy Leader is absolutely right that the government was short-sighted in withdrawing funding for NDPs. So I'm glad that you've supported that motion and undoubtedly will support the budget proposal put forward by the Conservative group for £250,000 of budget funding that was presented to officers a few weeks ago. So it looks like we're all pushing at an open door. We all want the same thing and look forward to seeing it in the budget.
Indeed, actually precursing to this notice of motion, we were already discussing this as an item because it's as soon as the government announced that they were withdrawing the funding, it was something that came up as a high priority because of our duty under the 2011 Act, but also because of our conviction that you have to carry people with you about the benefits and participation and involvement in what happens to their communities. So that is something that, anyway, we've got the, on this agenda, I'm happy to, Councillor Coucher, are you happy to confirm the recommendation to Council on this one?
I am, Chair. Clearly, we're not recommending any particular financial amount at this moment in time, but we're supporting the motion in principle.
Yeah, and I'm happy to second that motion be supported to go forward and obviously be considered as part of the budget review. Thank you very much. And moving on to the next. Sorry. Oh, yes. Are you all agreed on that being done? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item, which is the response to the notice of motion to support the reallocation of some new housing from Stratford-on-Avon district to Coventry. And again, this comes under the portfolio of Councillor Coucher.
Chair, this is a very complex matter and something which has changed very rapidly with this new government. The standard number that we have to provide in relation to housing was obviously significantly increased in relation to Stratford district and decreased in relation to Coventry. In some respects, that was quite helpful because I know we have now got, because planning regulations seem to change almost on a daily basis, the duty to cooperate is not quite the same matter, but the view was that we would be going to have to take a significant amount of housing from Coventry because of the government's reallocation on the standard numbers. Coventry basically now can deal with their own housing requirement, and there is no actual need for us to take additional housing for Coventry. I have to say that doesn't seem to be the case with regard to Birmingham, and that's a matter for this authority to consider going forward. If we were to ask Coventry to take some of our housing allocation, we would need to prove to them that we couldn't actually accommodate that amount of housing within the district. I think that's an extremely tall order and very difficult to do. So I think in many respects this notice of motion doesn't make an awful lot of sense at this particular point in time. At the moment we are obviously grappling with the South Warwickshire local plan and how our housing allocation will be allocated. I think this potentially is a red herring, and so therefore it's not something that we would support.
Councillor Passingham and Councillor Crump.
Right. Our MP, Manuela Pertigala, has recently written a letter to the Secretary of State for Housing, which I think you will have seen and read, which largely supports the argument in this motion that really it's very difficult for Stratford to accommodate the doubling of the housing targets at the same time as Coventry's has been reduced by over 60%. They were obviously planning in their previous local plan to accommodate a lot more housing on brownfield sites, as the motion says. But in Manuela's letter, she states a couple of things. Why has the government reduced housing requirements for many cities which are better placed to deliver social, affordable and low-cost homes, whilst dramatically increasing targets in rural shire areas where the market delivers expensive housing and where infrastructure funding is far more difficult to secure? And she continues to say, councils like Stratford are expected to deliver mass housing growth and even new towns, yet have no realistic means of securing the schools, GP provision, road capacity and public transport improvements these communities will need. Well, in terms of we have to prove that we can't accommodate this housing, surely that is a very good argument, because we can't accommodate sustainable housing, we can't accommodate the low-cost housing and all the other sort of provisions, because the government, there's no sign of any government funding. Surely that's an argument for saying that we can't accommodate the doubling of the housing targets. So would you reconsider and support the motion?
I'll bring in Councillor Coucher in a minute, and Councillor Crump wants to come in, but there is a difference between what we would love to do and actually the law. And the risk assessment that within the paper on 6.2 points out that when we have gone against legislation in the past, it has cost this council dear. It was in between 2012 and 2015, the then administration decided to go against the legislation that was pertaining at that time.
Chair, point of order. You've just said the then administration chose to go against, and that's not the case. We lost our 5-year land supply, and decisions were made by planning committees, not by the administration, and that's why we incurred those appeal fees. I'm sorry, Chair, I want that corrected. It was not the administration.
The councils, it is in the papers, and it says in the papers, and I'll read it out. The council's resistance was ultimately futile, and the cost of unsuccessfully fighting these appeals was in the region of 2 million. It was actually 2.2 million. Can I continue on with this meeting? Councillor Crump, you wanted to come in, and then Councillor Coucher.
Councillor Coucher is going to be surprised that I'm actually going to...
Shall I bring the Head of Law and Government's Monitoring Officer in first?
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder that the Chair presides, and if the Chair asks that everyone ceases speaking, then they cease speaking. It's right to make a point of reference about a point of order, but there's a way that it's done. Just a reminder.
And to continue with Councillor Crump and then Councillor Coucher.
Sorry, Monitoring Officer, if I spoke over you then. I didn't see you come in. So I was actually agreeing with Councillor Coucher, so he was probably surprised, and I was surprised that I think that whilst we appreciate that this council is probably one of the smallest in terms of population as a district council, and I think we've had the 4th highest number of houses built in 23 or 24, something like that. So it just seemed unfair and disproportionate, and nobody's telling me that the figures are wrong, hopefully. But I think it's no good saying this isn't fair. We ought to do. I think we've got to do things based on evidence and facts. And again, I'm agreeing with Councillor Coates, where we've got, we couldn't demonstrate that we're completely full in Stratford district, and we couldn't take any more from Coventry or Birmingham. Totally agree, and would be laughed out of court, or the government would say, you're talking a load of rubbish. What I think where the essence of this motion could be shifted to, and it is put in our update as well, is we could potentially ask the government to effectively prioritise brownfield sites and then try and limit the amount of greenfield sites being developed across the local area, and that might shift the emphasis. So we're not saying we don't want to do it or we can't do it, but can we do it potentially more on the brownfield sites, which would then push the housing away in more a slightly subtle way, rather than saying, no, it's not fair, we don't want them. So, again, like Councillor Pemberton, sorry, Dan, I forgot your name, we're agreeing that, this is the right thing not to support this, but perhaps the motion could come back in a different way, where we can potentially prioritise or ask for the prioritisation of brownfield sites. Thank you.
I'll bring in the Chief Executive at this point, and then Councillor Coucher, and then Councillor Gist.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring Councillors' attention to the actual word in the motion, which is on page 21 of the agenda under 1.1. the motion does specifically seek negotiations with Coventry City Council, and I think when Councillor Passenham was speaking, that was broadening the debate somewhat. The report, though, has been prepared specifically in addressing that particular request from Councillors Passenham and Mahatch, and would be that particular point referred to and referred back to Council.
Thank you for that. Councillor Coucher.
And I think on that point, Coventry's plan-making process is at a very different stage to our own, in that they already have got a Section 19 proposal actually being considered. So I think Coventry's likelihood in terms of negotiations are kind of remote. I would want to deal with some of the points that Councillor Passingham raised. And indeed, I had quite a lot of input into Manuela Pertigella's letter to the Minister. I think what she was saying was in relation to the general issue about the government's decision to move housing from urban areas where there's a greater chance of providing low-cost housing into rural areas such as Stratford, where the market may not support that so much. I think that's a genuine point. It's a political point. It's a point that needs to be dealt with in government, because that's the national decision that's been taken. I think what we're being asked here to do is to have one-to-one negotiations with Coventry, which frankly I don't think would work, because I don't think Coventry would want to have any discussions with us. And frankly, the question would be asked of us, why can't you accommodate your new standard number? And that is the process that we're going through in preparing a South Warwickshire local plan, and we're looking very closely. And one thing that, as somebody deeply involved in that process, I am absolutely adamant we are not going to be building houses in this district unless we've got adequate infrastructure to go alongside it. And that's going to be absolutely crucial for it. At the moment, I don't think we can say we can't provide it because we can't provide the infrastructure. I think that's still to be resolved, and that's a matter clearly for the South Warwickshire local plan going forward. I think in relation to Councillor Crump's view and what his comment he's making in relation to brownfields, we're already doing that. I think in terms of the preparation of the South Warwickshire local plan, priority is being given to brownfield sites first. So that's already implicit. I think it's quite right for us to re-emphasise that is important. We do want to minimise the amount of greenfield land that we actually have to take in terms of accommodating these housing needs.
And just to finalise on that one, it is worth noting in 1.10 that Coventry City Council's already submitted their plan for examination. So really, that is now gone. But the case does need to be made to government. And I was down at the Town and Country Planning Association conference last week for one day, and there's a lot more coming, a lot more change coming in the planning regimes, and some of which is very, very worrying indeed. So we will obviously have to wait and see what comes from that one. But the consultations and some of the views that were made by a KC at that conference were very concerning. Okay, Councillor Passingham.
Yeah. So, yeah, I accept a lot of what you're saying, and it would be very difficult. On the other hand, in lots of ways, it would a letter to Coventry City Council outlining that would not do any harm. But am I to take it from that you would support any future motion with a letter very similar to the one from Manuela Pertigeda, our MP, to the government, supporting those points you would support if we brought it back to the council?
I already took the opportunity down at the Town and Country Planning Association to talk to, I can't remember the name of the gentleman, but he was I think deputy director in MHCLG, saying that at some point it would be worthwhile this district council going down to speak to the government once we've got some more information and evidence and costings of a variety of things, particularly about our South Warwickshire local plan. But that is for the future. I certainly think we do need to take this further. But Councillor Coucher.
I think that's a national issue, which is why we've briefed MPs here in relation to it, and they have taken that matter up. I think our difficulty is that we have to have credibility here as a plan-making authority if we are seen to be just rebutting what is a national stance here. It may make our situation weaker in relation to trying to get through our plan. And our plan in this district, as I've already said, will rely very heavily on infrastructure. We will need government money potentially for schools and roads. So we have to, I think it's be running quite a delicate position here, where we're clearly going to be asking government to help us in terms of what we have to do in relation to making our plan. So I think actually just going head to head with the government at this stage probably is not the best thing for this council to do, but it's certainly something which MPs are taking up, and I think we would support them in dealing with that in Parliament.
The Chief Executive, David Buckland.
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to bring Cabinet back to the point. We're not talking about a potential future motion at the moment. We're talking about the motion which is identified on page 21. And if there was to be any future motion, then that would have to be determined whether that's debated at Council or referred back to the Cabinet for debate. But for today, the wording is very explicit on page 21, and it's talk about those negotiations with Coventry City Council.
And with that in mind, we have a recommendation to Council. For reasons set out in the report, the notice of motion is not supported. Councillor Coucher, are you going to propose that one? Councillor Coles, you second it. Thank you. And all in favour? Thank you very much. And moving on now to the notice of motion about the transfer of public open spaces to private owners. This is again under the portfolio of Councillor Coucher. Would you like to introduce this item?
So Chair, we inherited a situation whereby this council had a policy of allowing developers to set up management companies for new developments. This has been going on, I believe, since 2005, when this council took that decision to go down that route. And all it has done is created an awful lot of problems for local people. I'm very pleased that this council has now changed its approach, and management companies are very much a last resort issue in relation to new developments, and that is clearly being promoted by our officers in negotiation with developers. This notice of motion tries to deal with some of the residual problems that we have from the existing management company arrangements that have been set up since 2005. And I think many of us have many problems in our areas as a result of that, both in terms of how 106 agreements have been implemented, but also because of the lack of controls going forward. Unfortunately, the council is unable to wind back and make different decisions on each of those developments. But what we have been trying to do, and I think what the Working Party is trying to do, is to see where we can bring clarity, where we can try and ensure that management companies meet their obligations, and that is the work that is ongoing. So in relation to this notice of motion, which really sits alongside the work which a working group is working on at the moment, it is suggested that actually we do accept criterion 1, 2 and 4 of the notice of motion, and it be added to the terms of reference of the existing open spaces, section 106 task and finish group who are working, and the group report back on these issues in early 2026. I think if we don't actually tie this all together, we're in danger of the whole thing being a bit disparate and a lot of wasted effort here if we're not. We have a task and finish group who are working on it, and we need to make sure that this notice of motion is tied in with that. The second recommendation is that as detailed in 1.2 of the agenda report, criteria B3 confirmed as already satisfied and be noted. And therefore, in terms of doing that, so long as it's tied into what the Task and Finish group are doing, this notice is supported.
Thank you very much. And I would like to, are you proposing that?
I am proposing.
I will second that. I'm going to second it mainly because it was in 2019 that I brought a residents group from Ulster to this council with a petition, and they put their case to the council in 2019 about the issues that arose on their estate in Ulster, in Kinnerton, part of Ulster. And I thank them for raising this issue in the first place in 2019. And it's been a long route since then, but we are now getting some clarity on this. Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I sit on this Task and Finish group. And I think something that's come out of it that isn't in this motion, but we are discussing in detail, is clarity around road adoption. I think for all of us that have large developments or even smallish developments, having clarity at the planning stage around road adoption would make our lives easier. Because if the roads aren't going to be adopted, then that's where the problem often lies with who is going to look after that road. So I think in the past there hasn't been clarity, and I think going forward we need to look at that, and we are indeed looking at that. But I just wanted to flag that up as something that we are discussing on that group. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, and things like the adoption of sustainable urban drainage systems as well, and a variety of other issues. One of the things that I will draw to your attention in terms of the Task and Finish group is that they, as well as looking within, as outlined in 1.5, the work that they can do to make highlight specific actions that Stratford-on-Avon District Council is able to take versus those matters it can't directly affect but which need to go to government. In 1.6 it says there, and I believe this is in the Competition and Markets Authority report to government, is that they should lobby government to introduce new arrangements such as an ombudsman, because sometimes, as in the case of the pastures, it's not only to do with the conditions of the management company, it's sometimes about the original planning conditions as well. And an ombudsman could be the route to being able to sort some of those issues out. So thank you very much. This has been proposed and seconded. I'm happy to take any other questions. Otherwise, we just send this. Are you all happy to vote for this to be supported? Agreed. Okay, agreed. Thank you very much indeed. And the next item is the adoption of the infrastructure funding statement, pages 35 to 78. And again, this comes under the portfolio of Councillor Coucher. Would you like to outline the issues in this paper, please?
The infrastructure statement for 24-25, this is an annual report that we have to prepare every year, and I thank Sean Nicholson, our local plans manager, who has pulled the report together this year. There are some changes this year because clearly the way in which we are allocating SIL money has changed to be more effective in terms of doing that. But the infrastructure statement set out in terms of where we are. It obviously shows where we aspire for further infrastructure, particularly in facilities going forward. And so therefore I would move that we support the statement as written.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. The only, as the Deputy Leader points out, this is an annual report that is required of us as an organisation. And the funding statement identifies various projects, and as the Deputy Leader says, this administration has taken a different view as to how to use those funds, and that is, you know, that is absolutely within their gift. The only observation I would make is that just at a practical level, it would be, I think, useful, perhaps through the mechanism of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that there is perhaps if not quarterly, which might be too onerous, certainly a 6-month check-in around the progress of delivery of the projects. I'm minded to remind the leader that there is Section 106 monies to the tune of the thick end of £6 million for a site on the edge of Ulster, where we're sort of having struggles to sort of spend that money because of the way the Section 106 works. And obviously anything where there is any risk, and I hasten to add there is no risk at this point of those funds having to be returned. But we shouldn't get to a point where there's any risk or getting close to a risk of funds having to be returned because they're not spent. I think having some visibility for ONS moving forward, perhaps on a 6-monthly basis on the progress of IFS projects, Section 106 spends, would be a useful check-in to ensure that progress is being made, and that if there are barriers, and I say this really just as a way of creating visibility more than anything else, that then the corrective action might be identified by ONS and or the Cabinet to move these projects forward. You have decided these are the projects that want to move forward. I think a mechanism to ensure that that delivery is on track would not go amiss, and I make that observation as something that might aid the visibility and the deliverability of the projects within the IFS.
I'll bring in Councillor Coucher first, and then I will address the Ulster issue afterwards.
It's one of the things that we've looked at very carefully about the risk in relation to 106 money, which is one of the reasons why we have appointed officers now to actually monitor where we are going in relation to 106. And I'm really happy that this authority is now on the front foot in relation to that, rather than where it was 2 years ago, very much on the back foot, and where we didn't really know where things were happening. And I know it's something that I review as portfolio holder very, very rigorously to make sure there is absolutely no chance whatsoever of 106 money being or 278 money being recalled. But we are not masters in our own house, and we are very often reliant on other authorities basically to do that. In relation to monitoring it, we do actually at Cabinet Forum actually get a 6-monthly report, and I see no reason at all why that can't come fully to Cabinet.
Just in case anybody wishes to check on projects in their area, page 71 does list completed projects, and it's very useful to see how many projects have been completed. But addressing one in Ulster, there was plans for an extra care home on a site owned by Warwickshire County Council, which is an old school. But unfortunately, it's in a flood zone 3. You can't really have extra care facilities for vulnerable people in an area that has flood zone 3. And because the Environment Agency has not been able to upgrade the flood defences on that side of town, it remains in a flood zone 3, and therefore as I understand it, the county council now is thinking of selling that site. So again, there are complications that are not always very simple to. I don't know whether any officers want to say anything, but I do understand sometimes these are more complex than you make out. Councillor Pemberton. Okay. Do you want to come in? Yeah. Okay.
Before I come to the Deputy Leader's point about monitoring Section 106 spend, I highlighted that site because of the complexities. That was not a criticism, it's highlighting the challenges and therefore the need to be able to monitor it. I understand the background to it, but it's there because it's pretty much the largest single contribution. But I understand the complexities. Just as a point of clarity for the Deputy Leader, and I'm sure that the Head of Service for Planning and Policy will confirm this, that there was a monitoring process. There was a huge spreadsheet that was reported to on a regular basis about progress against delivery of Section 106 monies. that was put together by planning development colleagues before and during the tenure of the head of when he became head of service. So it is not accurate to say that there was not a review process in place. As the deputy leader says, there are a lot of moving parts to all of this, and I accept that that is the case. It is just saying and it's useful to hear, but of course, if no cabinet forum is not a meeting that is reported on, then there are minutes. So in the absence of knowing that, it's not the most illogical thing to say perhaps every 6 months we should report on it. It's good that you are, and perhaps, as you say, Deputy Leader, you should, that perhaps updating overview and scrutiny perhaps on that would be a useful piece of transparency, and I know that that is an important tenet for this administration.
I'll bring in the Chief Executive at this point, and then we'll go to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm no longer the 151 officer of the council, but I've got an interest in finance still. I just want to bring members' attention to Appendix 2 to the Capital Budget Monitoring Report that was reported to the Cabinet on the 3rd of November, where there's a schedule dedicated to the expenditure of both CIL and Section 106 schemes. So elected members aren't receiving reports which show the progress in delivery against those schemes. The particular reference to the Maudsley Park Section 106 contribution, the District Council has not got the opportunity to spend those funds at the moment. The first, I believe it was 5 or 6 years of the scheme, it was to deliver extra care schemes by the County Council. In the event that they can't get schemes away in that area, that money then reverts to the District Council for affordable housing projects. We're not in that period as yet. Thank you.
It is with the County Council. John Kerr for the Head of Development.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a minor point. Based on comments from OSC previously and the Cabinet, we are looking at the presentation of the IFS. There is a version that we've got that's got some graphics in it. We're also looking at a separate map has been requested. So it was just if Cabinet are happy that a slightly different version is the one that's published, one that's got some additional graphics. The text isn't changing, but if members are happy, we can publish a slightly different version of the IFS than presented here. Thank you.
That's a sensible recommendation, and thank you very much indeed for putting that forward. Then we now have the proposals, the recommendation. Councillor Coucher, you are proposing that?
I am.
I'm happy to second it. And are you all in favour of that accepting? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then to the next one, which is under the Law and Governance portfolio, and it's about the Generative Artificial Intelligence Policy for Stratford-on-Avon District Councils, pages 79 to 94. And over to Councillor Gist.
Thank you, Leader. I'm slightly concerned this will be out of date by the time I finish speaking, but this policy is to ensure consistency in how AI is adopted and governed. It outlines the current list of AI-approved tools, and it applies to councillors. I thought worth making that point to councillor colleagues. So in the course of your work, particularly as councillors for the District Council, then it does apply. So I strongly recommend everyone reads it. And because this is such a fast-moving field, it will be kept under regular review. So the recommendation to council is that the AI policy Appendix 1 to the agenda report be approved and adopted.
And can I just check that this applies to everybody in the District Council, including councillors?
Yes, it does.
About
Everyone in
the way that they deal with
council, yeah.
this and adhere to this policy. Councillor Pemberton, you want to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things in my own mind. As I read this, this is more about the use of tools rather than our overarching approach to how we're going to redesign us as an organisation and services by taking advantage of AI. Is that the intention? This is more as an interim first step around how we look at the tools and how we use the tools. Is that broadly the principal thrust?
Yep. Yes, it is. Looking at the website or how, as an organisation, then...
okay. I just have one specific concern to raise, and that's under Section 6, the use of generative AI at externally arranged or hosted meetings, which is becoming more and more and more of a thing. And I suppose the question is the notion that, you know, if we're at a meeting with MHCLG and they're using generative AI, and they will use generative AI, and I don't know whether they are yet, but I use that as a hypothetical. The notion that we're going to withdraw from that meeting because they're using generative AI isn't the answer. That once the minutes are produced, that if the minutes are inaccurate as an attendee to the meeting, you go back and say the minutes are inaccurate in point X, Y, and Z, rather than suggesting that I'm just concerned that, and as you rightly say, Councillor Giss, by the end of this meeting, this policy will be out of date, that the pace of use of particularly, and I'm seeing this almost daily in business meetings, that the notes are being produced by, you know, usually a paid-for version, which is the one with more of the checks and balances. I just have some concern about this notion that we can step away from the use of, and I merely just flag, is there a better way? And I'm happy if officers have got a particular rationale, but I'm just thinking on the practicalities. You know, within 3 months the world will be doing this, and we could be alone in saying we're not going to play.
I'm sure that we have to keep up to date. The most most essential thing is to manage is to ensure that risks are managed, that data is protected, that we are protected. In an age, and I have conversations with my son who works in AI, but about this. We don't know quite what lies ahead, but we've got to be able to make sure that everybody that shares their data in and with this council, that we are managing those risks. Could I? Anybody else would like to come in?
Chair, can I just comment on that particular point, if that's okay? Because this is about ensuring the preservation of the council's data. The point that the leaders made is absolutely correct, and we have to comply with our GDPR requirements within that. There are some we have certain checks and balances in place in relation to the paid-for version of Copilot that we have as an organisation. We're not saying that officers have to withdraw entirely, but make their objections clear and take no part in the discussion or decision making, but they can still attend the meeting. But what the primary aim here is to preserve the council's data. That's the reasoning and rationale for that particular section.
So we have a notice of motion. We have a policy in front of us, and Councillor Giss, I presume. Councillor Coles, you want to come in at this point?
Thank you. I have a particular interest in this because of my many decades' experience as a chartered librarian and a knowledge management worker. And I think one of the most important things, which is outlined in here but needs to be said, is that whatever tools we use, the output is our responsibility. We cannot abdicate any responsibility of thinking or deciding or maintaining records or ensuring that things are right. We cannot abdicate that to anybody. It is our responsibility as individual councillors. As the council, we have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of the council's records and information and decisions and knowledge. Tools are tools. I expect people had this argument when we moved from scrolls to paper, and we're now having this argument again. But if we maintain our knowledge and our respect for the fact that this, when it comes down to it, everything is our responsibility, regardless of the tool you use, we start from that point and work on what the tools we are using, that should keep everything in balance. Thank you.
And I echo that as a scientist, the ability to be able to always check and make sure that any data is not only protected but is accurate and is properly maintained. Councillor Pemberton.
I think actually Councillor Coles has made my point for me. These are tools to use. If these tools are producing minutes, it's your job as the meeting attendee to ensure that they are accurate. So I think that somewhat makes the point that you don't slavishly listen to it. But I just merely make the observation, and I'm not sure there's any further where to go.
We've had a proposer, Marcia Eccleston, the head of Law and Government's Non-Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back in just on the point about confidentiality and our responsibility. As members, obviously you have reiterated that and we as officers support that. But I just want to explain a little bit more about what we all understand about AI at the moment. It is a learning tool. And at the point where it's learning, if we share confidential information in that meeting, either at the beginning of that meeting or at the end after the minutes are actually dealt with, we've already potentially allowed that AI to learn confidential information, and we may therefore be at risk of breaching. So it's better that we are upfront right at the beginning and explain our position about how we will deal with that confidential information. And if we can't manage to protect our residents' confidential information, then we should withdraw.
Thank you very much indeed. That is very, very useful. We've had Councillor Gist has proposed. I'm happy to second. Are you all in agreement with that item? Okay, thank you very much indeed. And we now move on to the response to the notice of motion, hospital access and information. And this comes over to the portfolio for Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Councillor Rock and Councillor Hench-Serafin for bringing this forward. We have taken note, and in fact I had already been in conversation with many of our partner organisations about some of the issues arising from this. The proposal is that we support the motion, and we are planning to create a summit of these partners to discuss what is possible and what we can do. We are also working closely with the voluntary sector, specifically with VASA, who have been very helpful in helping formulate our thinking on this. It is an issue, especially because of the rurality of the district. I certainly think there is some very exciting work we can do here, and I hope that the council and as well as the cabinet are happy to support this. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to support that one. Say for all the reasons that you've outlined. It is a rural area. We do depend on the volunteer drivers who do a fantastic amount of work, and we certainly support. I know that in Ulster the VASA drivers are used extensively, and it's good to support their work. But also coming on to the new, unitary that will eventually come in this area, bringing the moment Stratford District Council is not responsible for transport, but I think we start having to prepare for the days when we will be responsible, or a unitary council will be responsible for transport as well as health and other adult social care, etc. Councillor Coles.
No, I'd have to agree with you. Regardless of what the outcome is, this is certainly something that somebody somewhere is going to have to take account of, and I think doing the preparation can only be helpful regardless of where it goes. I would just like to draw everybody's attention to page 103. Not right now, but it is very interesting to look at the number of journeys made from where to where. It's not a straightforward problem. Everybody's going from everywhere to everywhere else in terms of where they live in the district, what hospital medical appointments they're going to, and it is certainly a very interesting study. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So you've proposed that. I've seconded that. So the recommendation to council is that we support the motion, and in doing so, we will organise a summit with key partners. Okay. Are you all happy to accept that? Thank you very much. So moving on next to an area that comes under my portfolio, which is the electric vehicle charge point installation proposals on page 105 to 176. And this considers a report proposing the installation of electric vehicle charge points on council-owned car parks. And these are council-owned car parks right across the district. And I particularly welcome the fact that they've looked wider than just the provision or the potential provision of charging points and rapid charging points, not just slow charging points to residents, but they're also visitors to the area, and anticipating the fact that there will be more changes with things like bus transport, coach transport, etc. In future years. So we've got the potential for the leisure centre car park, Riverside car park, where there's already a lot happening already. In fact, I believe we're waiting for an outline study for work for solar panels for that area already. I think it's expected in November, isn't it? Well, was expected in November, so it must be imminent. I don't know whether you're able to outline that, Deputy Chief Exec.
Yes, conscious that November was drawn to a close. I did chase it on Friday and was assured we'd have it sort of any time now, but it hadn't arrived as of this morning, so I shall chase it again.
And that kind of then allows for the increase in rapid charge, potentially rapid charge thing. I do know that on a trip to Wales, how glad I was to be able to find a rapid charge point just on the borders with Wales, where I could literally charge up in 20 minutes in order to be able to join my family on a holiday in Wales in my electric car. Very, very useful stopping point that was. And being able to have that for travellers, tourists in our area who are visiting Stratford or are passing through would be extremely useful, especially if there was the chance to be able to go and have a cup of coffee and in a nice, warm, safe place as well. Okay, anybody? Councillor Pemberton? Oh, Councillor Crump, I think, came in first.
Thank you, Councillor Junior. Yeah, this discussed scrutiny in quite a few, deep in depth, actually. Still quite a few questions to answer regarding this, and this is no criticism. I think there's the update sheet from scrutiny acknowledges that, particularly around how town centre locations are more favourable and more likely to be bid for than more rural ones. Potentially a single tap-and-go mobile phone app could be used for all sites, but then you're going to be locked into that option. But having multiple providers and multiple different apps across the district would be potentially undesirable. Potential is also about security, liability and risk would be key considerations as well, particularly the theft of the materials that provide the chargers. I believe they are particularly desirable at the moment. So I think there's, again, supportive of this. There's still quite a few questions to be answered. And again, I'd like this to come back to scrutiny so we can see how the tenders are going, and even we have to go into confidential because there might be very complex issues and balances which you will have to get. You might not necessarily get the return that you wanted in return for more rural locations having access as well. So, yes, support the principle. Still lots of questions to be answered, but no real issues from scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those people that have got the papers in front of them, 1.2.11 outlines that subject to legal searches on the car parks being completed, a tender would be prepared and launched in January 2026, which is not that far away. So there should be something to report back, which following the 4-week pre-screening questionnaire, then an 8-week invitation to tender, then we will know what the position is with those people that have tendered. And there's some, it'd be interesting to see what those tenders come up with. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you very much. A couple of observations, and particularly around the provision of solar canopies on car parks, and the leisure centre has been particularly referenced. Those of you with longer memories will know that there was a feasibility study conducted by the previous administration in 2022 about solar panels over the leisure centre car park. At that point, it wasn't something that looked like it was feasible. And you will also, certain members of Cabinet will also be aware that, again, earlier in the summer, as an opposition, we have put forward a proposal to repurpose the funds for the hydro scheme for solar canopies on the leisure centre car park, with a view to potentially one of those outputs being that those canopies power up EV car charging points. And so I am pleased to hear that, as I read in other papers, that the that there is an update, refresh study, which I am fairly certain is going to mean that the case is now there for solar canopies above car parks and funding EV charging points. And so my only question around the proposal here for a procurement exercise is, does this allow sufficient flexibility that were a solar canopy scheme to be put in place, that potentially, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a librarian, and so I don't know what the engineering mechanics of all of this are, but just to be, if we are thinking of going down and I'm looking at the Deputy Chief Executive for perhaps some guidance to answer this, if we're going down the route of more EV charging, got no problem with that, but we're also looking at PVs, that we're joined up about this and that there's a dovetailed scheme and that we don't have the law of unintended consequences. I would be keen to hear the Deputy Chief Executive's thoughts and potential reassurances on that point.
I'll bring the Deputy Chief Exec, but there's some really good examples right across the country that are working very well and have worked very well for many, many years. This is not a new concept, and indeed this council has been working on this now since the summer about the idea of putting the tender out and coming up with a different scheme for the PV and the charging over around the district, but particularly this particular car park. The Deputy Chief Executive, perhaps you can answer the questions put to you.
Yes, certainly, Leader. We discussed this in a reasonable depth at the Avon Scrutiny Committee, oddly enough. So it's I'll say the same as much the same as I sort of said there. We are still awaiting the PV carport feasibility report. One of the things that's delayed that is trying to sort of get a handle on what the best use of that electricity is. As I said to the Open Scrutiny Committee, we really need a retail consumer for that electricity, because putting it into the grid sort of has a detrimental effect on the economics of the scheme. There is a rationale to putting it straight into the leisure centre, but we've already put a solar array into the leisure centre, and the way that the leisure centre operator, where everyone active, procures their electricity, it's in bulk, so there is a commercial downside for them purchasing less. That's one of the options we're exploring. We're also going to sort of look at other businesses around the area. There are a couple of hotels, there's an office block there. If we could get a sort of private wire agreement with them, that may be economical and the right thing to do. But there is also the possibility of putting it probably into a battery store, which could then feed into the EV installations. That sounds like a good idea, but the complications that come out of that is then who owns the battery, who has the liability for the maintenance of that. You'll notice in the detail of this report, we're recommending that we do a solution which is sort of owned and operated by a private operator, because they've got the economies of scale and the expertise to do these things. Once we introduce our own infrastructure into that, then we have the liability of sort of making sure that sort of battery is in good condition. I think somebody's also mentioned the security risks of that with the heavy metals in the battery. That introduces a security risk that we would have to secure, and we would have to sort of put this into the tender for EVs. So at the moment, it's in the distinctly possible category, but it's not an absolutely clear-cut best solution for the electricity. My plan is to get the feasibility report back in, and based on that, try and sort of work out what the best solution for this is going forward. And we would include it, I would imagine, as a proviso within the EV tender, that this may be an option that we would be looking to feed in.
Okay, I probably should have declared an interest in that I'm a driver of an electric vehicle and have been since 2011, but I charge from home. Okay, I don't know if there's anybody else got an electric. Oh, one other person got an electric car. Okay. All right, you've got one. Okay, all right. We have the item before us, and we have a summary, and we have recommendations. We've got 4 recommendations, and number 1 is to enable the procurement and installation of electric charge points on council-owned car park, as detailed in the report. That we could proceed to procure a service provider to install and manage the charging infrastructure through a joint tender process with Warwick District Council, subject to both councils' agreement. that approval is given to explore and implement the best solution to mitigate any lapse in current provision prior to a longer-term solution being procured, and that the Deputy Chief Executive, in consultation with the Monitoring Officer and Section 151 Officer, be given delegated authority to action the proposals set out in the report. And it would be useful to also see the connection between the other projects that are happening in the same sphere at some point, probably for overview and scrutiny purposes. Okay. I'm happy to propose that. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Adam. Okay. Are you all in agreement? Thank you. We're moving on now to another item that's under my portfolio, which is the performance monitoring report on pages 187 to 218. Oh, sorry. We've got the delivery of the climate change adaptation audit programme, which is also under my portfolio and an extremely important part of my portfolio, I have to say. So we've got that page on page 177 to 186. And while people turn to that. And this is because obviously over the last 30 years we've done a lot of work on mitigation, but it has become increasingly obvious, and it was made obvious by the Climate Change Committee's report fairly recently in 2025, that some of the mitigation, we need to go beyond mitigation because climate change is happening, and as we've already gone beyond certain points where we need to be taking more action, and so adaptation has to come in, and this is to make sure that we are doing a pilot project on various schemes and asking people to come forward to give their proposals for the pilot projects. And this is to use 150,000 from the Council's Climate Change Reserve to enable the delivery of the adaptation audit programme as detailed in the agenda report. Have you got any questions that anybody wants to raise? Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. I understand, and we are on the same page about our need to address climate change, how we mitigate, how we achieve the least increase in temperatures possible, and how we adapt. And so, please understand we're on the same page. I am going to ask you to consider withdrawing and pausing on this item. And I had a conversation with the Deputy Chief Executive this morning, a brief one, having gone through the papers over the weekend. And with your forbearance, I'd like to spend a minute or so to explain my rationale for this, Councillor Coles. I have some expertise in this matter in the sense that I am an associate of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and the only person in this room who's run a claims department for a top 10 insurer. It is a rational approach for a public body to say it wants to do an audit, to evaluate a course of action. And the only challenge I bring to you here about that is that this has been an unsurprisingly inward-looking process. And I say that as an observation, not a criticism, because that's how we do stuff. But you have three audiences for this piece of work. Business, which will be the largest group, parish and town councils, community groups. Since the Paris Climate Accord, the global insurance industry declared its #1 risk factor to be global warming, climate change, and mitigating and adapting to it. In this country, insurers spend hundreds of millions of pounds providing risk management advice. That risk management advice includes risk advice on adapting to and mitigating against climate change. Insurers, including up the road, the 8th largest insurer in the country, the NFU, spend tens of millions of pounds co-funding adaptations for businesses. So any business of any reasonable size, perhaps employing more than 50 people or any complexity, we call them strategic risk registers, they call them disaster recovery plans. They have already their own audit in place. They have their insurance brokers, their insurers rocking up with risk managers, telling them and advising them and working with them how to actually achieve change. So that audience is not going to engage with your audit process because it has no need to. And frankly, it's going to listen to its insurer before it listens to you. Okay? When you then come to micro businesses, shops, they don't have the bandwidth to do an audit, but they do know what the problem is that sits in front of them. They operate from a street that floods. They don't need an audit that tells them that. Parish and town councils have, some of them have an estate, usually a building. So again, they're in that micro-organisation and have little bandwidth. And the notion that parish councillors could engage with and do complex audits around climate change is challenging. And similarly with community organisations. So my observation about this is an understandable and well-meaning approach to this solution. But there is already a big bazooka being thrown at this thing, and we will make no difference whatsoever. I believe we could actually skip the audit process bit, and actually we would be better off spending our £150,000. A Google search over the weekend tells me about £500 or £600 will put demountable flood doors into premises. Think about what we might do practically. Superficially, doing an audit will tell us something. Leave aside the fact that you've got a sample size of 10, so that's what, 3 businesses, 3 parish councils, 3 community groups, which is not statistically going to tell you anything. You've got your biggest audience already has far more sophisticated advice available to it with money to back it up than we can make a difference. And I would just ask you to take a consider and a pause as to whether this, in this particular instance, the usual approach of go through an audit, tell you, we know we can make a difference with £150,000 from the Climate Panel Fund, you know, for flood doors for a parish council or a community group or a business or anything else. I fear that you will end up not achieving the outcome that you want, which is to achieve a step change in how businesses, organisations address and adapt to climate change, because the largest part of your audience has access to that, does do it. It's not the same as your house and contents insurance. They don't do that for you, but businesses do. If you are unsure at all, may I suggest you write to the Association of British Insurers, who will tell you chapter and verse how much money and what work is being done to achieve this. You could pause this item for your next committee meeting just to do that. You could speak to the NFU Mutual just to do that. So I would just ask you, and I know you're being caught on the bounce, but I would just ask you to pause on this one and think, is there a better way to achieve this? I don't see that, again, writing to the ABI, which for those not in the know is the Association for All Insurers in the UK. They will provide you with, you could go to the website of any commercial insurer and they'll show you what they've done. I've been in factories, engineering shops with risk managers, seeing what they do and how businesses engage with them around that. So I would just ask you to think whether you might achieve the outcome in a better way. Perhaps you may just want to be thinking about literature that you put out to smaller businesses, or actually a scheme that says we'll co-fund flood doors, for example. There's any myriad of things you can do. I would just ask you to think about that and to consider a pause. And you might find actually there's an awful lot more going on out there through a different route that is engaging in doing what you're trying to achieve.
I've never worked for the insurance companies, but I have worked as a voluntary advisor to the Environment Agency for many years, and I was responsible for doing all the recording of the incident of the flooding that happened in Ulster in 1998, 2001, 2007, and I think 2017. I put forward reports to the pit review. I also did reports to the government select committees that looked at the flooding as well. I've also worked on climate change in my professional life. Just a couple of incidents, a couple of items recently that there was a small fund from the Climate Change and Nature Fund, and Great Orme took this up as a parish council. They have done absolutely magnificent work. And the work they did was their village was made inaccessible several winters and several days per winter. Children were not able to get to the local school because of flooding caused by surface water drains that had not been cleared or were not adopted, or drainage that was on private land. They have, between them, managed to, and this is an example of work that could be done under an audit and a project. They have recruited members of the public from Great Orme to become linesmen. They were trained by the county council on safety. They were bought equipment to do their work. And they've worked with private landowners, they've worked with the county council and others to make sure that all the drains across the whole of Great Orme are not only recorded and cleared, but that also they are maintained as volunteers. They're doing this, and they've not had a single incident of flooding this last winter. So they did that audit work, and they did the clearance. And in Ulster, we've also done flood work. And again, most of that is being done by volunteers to work with people to make sure that they can leave their homes and be able to be helped from their homes should flooding occur. One incident that occurred to me that in the 1998 flood was the Environment Agency accepted recordings of every house that was flooded, but did not take into account any businesses that were flooded at that time. So the advice at that time some advice went to households, but advice to the micro businesses or the small businesses, the shops on the high street, did not occur. We want to make sure that this kind of work is supported in future. Councillor Coles.
I can go first, that's fine. I just wanted to echo what you'd said, Councillor Juliet. The suggestion that town and parish councils, I mean, the encyclopedic knowledge in my town and parish councils, in mine and Councillor Rock's ward, and the expertise of the people who volunteer to be parish councillors, local communities know what they need. And that's what the point of this report is. They know Fenny Compton has trouble with flooding, and they sort of come up with a natural scheme to sort of sort the water course out. They live there, they know, and this is the opportunity for them to tell us.
Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Yes, I think I'd have to echo what Councillor Gister said. There has been, that this wasn't knocked up over a weekend with a Google search. There's been considerable thought put into this. And I think one of the differences that we need to make sure we don't doing it is a great mistake to underestimate the capacity of smaller organisations and community groups, such as the one Councillor Gist has mentioned, and that they are interested and want to be involved and want to take part in this pilot. And I think also there's a difference, because obviously in the end insurance is a commercial industry. They will take a commercial view and they will direct their decisions on a commercial basis, whereas our pilot is going to look across all three sectors in terms of the councils, community charity groups and smaller independent businesses. And the other thing is, I think this report, the primary thrust of this report is we do not shirk our responsibilities onto other organisations. We can't say, oh, so-and-so is probably doing something, it's okay. We are taking our responsibility in this area quite seriously, and this audit is part of that duty that we are taking as part of that responsibility. Thank you.
And Councillor Passingham, you could probably tell me all about the volunteers that are working down in Shipston, a tremendous amount of work that they've done down there.
Yeah, I was actually, yeah. But we're in the Shipston Area Flood Action Group, we do an awful lot, and another £10,000 towards a new small project. It's cost a lot more than £10,000 so far to do what's been done there. And there are a number of other things going on around Shipston I'm involved in that could be considered climate adaptation. I mean, obviously welcome £150,000 to this. And the nice thing about most of what you can do with climate adaptation is they're also mitigation measures as well. So they stop carbon being emitted as well. But I'm slightly confused as to what the audit part of it will do, the £35,000, because there are lots of things going on already where the town and the parishes are being advised about what they can do with climate change. WALC, the Warwickshire Association of Local Government, do various Zooms and workshops on it. There was a climate, what was it called, climate engagement program in Leamington a few weeks ago. So a lot, as has been just said, there are a lot of people know what's to be done. So, so what is the audit part of this, the £35,000? What exactly is that going to do?
It's the idea of the audit is to capture, because at the moment everybody's doing their own thing, but they're not actually sharing the information probably enough, and you need to capture the information and what works and what doesn't work, and make sure that we are building that, and then eventually working with bigger organisations. It is sad that the Environment Agency has lost so much of its funding over the last 10 years or so. But there are other organisations. We need to be able to make sure that we are working with all the organisations that are needed. We may need to make sure that we are building in the adaptation of premises, the personal resilience kits, the use of nature to reduce, that's tree planting, etc. And then lines of communication as well, making sure that it all works and is all knitted together, because at the moment that is not always the case. And I now have Councillor Adam that wants to come in.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to speak, I suppose, on the way in which organisations have a perception of the risk that they need to adapt to. Because I think you're right, in terms of flooding, we know when a premises floods and how we might have to deal with that. But we can't just say, well, let's reallocate this money to buying everyone flood doors, because actually there are other adaptations that are unknown, particularly when you're looking at, say, heat waves and things like that. These are aspects which are less tangible from the outside, and it's precisely this type of audit process which demonstrates how businesses and residences of all different scales can adapt, and that forms a policy basis that we can take forwards. It's not about necessarily just delivering to individuals from our point of view. We need to demonstrate how other people can do it and be a leader in that, because it enables people to carry that forward themselves off the back of what we put forward. And I think also what's been mentioned before, I'm certainly concerned the idea that we look at just utilising insurance companies' points of view, because they'll also have their own inward perspective, which is commercially sensitive to them and not actually as comprehensive as we have to be representing our public.
Thank you very much indeed. And I've got, issues with the insurance company insurance companies in Ulster, but I won't dwell on that, that at the moment. Councillor Pemberton.
So, first of all, it's not over a weekend. I've got 30 years' experience in this industry, and I see what's going on. And there's an awful lot of assumptions and an awful lot of stereotypes going on around the room here. Commercial organisations looking inward. Absolutely, they're commercial organisations. That doesn't stop them spending hundreds of thousands of pounds at individual premises to mitigate a risk.
Are you declaring an interest as an employee of an insurance industry?
I'm not. I do not work for an insurance company. I've got 30 years' experience in that industry. It's the insurance equivalent of being a scientist. I may continue. Councillor Adam raises the question about heat, and Tony Perks and I touched on that this morning. So retail businesses have big, large windows in front of them, which we all know eventually is going to become part of a heat issue.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor. Would this perhaps not be better untangled and explored within the audit process?
I just might make an observation.
Could I propose that at an overview and scrutiny committee that you explore this in more depth?
Well, that would be.
But once we know the outcome of the audit programme, and then you can look at what is being proposed once the next stage beyond the pilots.
Can I just make the point? Councillor Adam made the point about heat. And from retail perspectives, large glass frontages are the biggest area where the heating of premises comes about. The notion that we as a district council are going to change how UK PLC retail on the high street redesigns its shop frontages, that is so far above our pay grade as to not be even worth trying. That is something that we have to understand what we can do. And I see no reason why you could just not pause for 1 month, one cycle meeting, try and find out what exactly is going on in the real world. Charge your Deputy Chief Executive to make an inquiry with the Association of British Insurers. Understand what is being done. If you are still happy that this is the right approach, then fine, but not to be even prepared to ask the question of what's going on would seem to be not the most outward-looking and rounded way of approaching an issue.
I'll bring the Deputy Chief Executive in first, then I'll bring in... would you like to go first, Councillor Cole?
It's just an observation that the point of an audit is to get information. The information gathering is part of an audit. Why do we pause doing an audit in order to wait and see what information when we can get? When the whole purpose of an audit is to get the information. This is our policy. I don't see any point to pause it.
I was just wondering, Leader, that you were in early this morning. Councillor Pemberton could have raised it with you then.
Can I bring in the Chief Executive, because you've obviously had a conversation with this morning. Okay.
I think you flattered me slightly with your title there, Leader, but I'll take it. Yes, Councillor Pemberton did pop and see me this morning. Unfortunately, I've not had the opportunity since that time to update the Cabinet. And I think Councillor Pemberton raises some interesting points that are surprisingly compatible with the debate that we've had about how we've put this together. So I think we're all in much the same place. I think this is an initiative that was identified in your climate change and nature recovery strategy, and we need to sort of start making some progress on adaptation, which is something you've said to me. I think the idea of the audit, if we perhaps called the audit an evidence gathering phase, it was looking to, I think, pick up a lot of the points that people have said here, that we would seek to sort of gather information about what the best way to spend this money is before we sort of commit the capital fund that you've committed. We wanted, during the debate that we had when we were forming this, to get some real-life sort of case studies from businesses and community groups that we could roll out on a wider scale. And I think perhaps some sort of literature review to inform how we go about that might be helpful, to gather some evidence as we go to them, but we also inform it with real-world examples, as I think Councillor Cole's mentioned. So I think we can continue to take this forward and sort of perhaps learn a little bit from this debate, because I think we all want the same thing, which is effective deployment of this money to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
Councillor Crump.
Yeah, just very briefly on this. I have got a bit of expertise on flooding. There's a couple of things. I think we shouldn't ignore any evidence that's available, be it from the private sector or public sector as well. So I think it all adds to the debate, all adds to the evidence, and using the money wisely. Obviously, a significant amount, 150,000, but that won't solve all the issues throughout the district. That could be spent in one area, and that would be easily spent. I think we do have to be careful of unintended consequences of actions, because if we look at one area individually, we say about local parishes, organisations, they do a good job, but they're concerned about their own little area, and they might do something that has adverse applications downstream from a flooding point of view. So I think we do need to look at a strategic effect of this. We also need to make sure we're spending the money wisely and effectively. And that would be, I think that would fall under the remit of OSC to see how the money is spent. So I think it would be good to come back to OSC in the future. Thank you.
I mean, it does strike me that an awful lot of these things could have been raised at the time when the climate change nature recovery strategy and action plan was actually being went through committee and through the cabinet. None of this was raised at that time. But we do need to move forward. We need to make sure that we work with all organisations to address the adaptation issue. It's no use kind of putting this back and back and back, because we've got issues that are coming up daily. They say the Climate Change Committee's progress report to Parliament in 2025 said that UK's preparations for climate change are inadequate. And that adaptation programme is either too slow, has stalled, or is going in the wrong direction. We need the evidence now. We need the evidence to go into our health and wellbeing plans. We need the evidence to go into our planning, South Warwickshire local plan at a time when we can actually do something about it, rather than waiting until it's too late and then crying. This is what we did with the pandemic. We just did not prepare beforehand, and making sure that we are properly adapted to what is coming. We need to make sure that the people of this district are properly looked after, and that we do not leave them to the mercies of flooding because and other things that were going to happen for climate change, just because we decided to put it off until later. So with that, moving forward, I bring forward 2 recommendations: that the proposals to deliver a pilot climate change adaptation audit programme be supported, and that 150,000 be allocated from the Council's climate change reserve, which is already there as a reserve in the budget, to enable the delivery of the adaptation audit programme as detailed in the agenda report. I'm going to propose that. Have we got a seconder? Councillor Coles. Thank you very much. Let's move forward and be at the forefront of this, and I'll say that before I ask you all to agree. Are you all in agreement? Okay, thank you. Then moving forward onto the performance monitoring report, which is on pages 187 to 218, and anybody that is going to make any comments on the performance report. And this is the Q2 for the delivery of the council plan actions and key performance indicators. So this covers July to September. There's some great stuff that's in there that has been achieved, and I would like to say thank you to the council officers for reaching their targets and for the actions that are ongoing. Anybody want to make any comments about any particular performance action? Councillor Coles.
Yes, just a quick one. Obviously, there is an enormous amount of good work here, and many targets achieved. Some have been slowed, few been delayed. I just wanted to raise the work that's currently being done on the Go plan at the moment. It's an extremely effective partnership with other organisations and brings a lot of expertise, experience and informed help to the decision making on setting these objectives. And I just again wanted to thank all those partners who take time to come and join and create this Go plan with us.
And again, I would like to say thank you to those that put so much work into achieving the Green Flag Award for the Bancroft. But particularly, I'd like to be able to say those people that put work into the Eco4 Flex scheme that enabled the provision of long-term conditions for home improvements and improving housing conditions for vulnerable health groups. I'm glad that you were able to achieve that before this winter. There's much more to be done on further review of cost of living funding that will go forward. We cannot at the moment, we can't. The cost of living crisis is still at its height, and we still need to make sure that people are supported. One of the things that we have now got is we had the infrastructure panel to implement the new arrangements for the review and oversight of CEL and Section 106 monies, and that's been achieved. been quite a few actions on the housing strategy which are ongoing, and obviously the South Warwickshire local plan is ongoing. Anybody want to say anything more? Because there's certainly some good stuff in there about the work that this council is doing, not only in the house but also with others, with our partners. Councillor Crump.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, we discussed this at scrutiny on Friday, on Wednesday. Still not used to the meetings on a Wednesday and a Friday. Computer access terminals. I think there's an action that may need to be reviewed as the take-up has been low. So there's one that needs to be looked at. Installation of solar panels. Issues in Southam may result in the project being delivered in the summer of 2026. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. And when I walk by with the dog, I'll certainly know if the panels are there. So that'll be good. There were some queries about council tax collection being underperformance and what was being done to correct this, the implications of overturned planning decisions on appeal rising from 2 to 3% in terms of the number of additional houses. So there's some things that we need some more information on. That was agreed to be provided at a later date. Some things we need to be aware of, slight delays. And the other thing that was mentioned, and I will give a shout out to Councillor Keithley for his excellent work in the health screening project that he worked on. So that is really positive. So I think that's probably one of the highlights of the performance of the performance. So big thanks to Councillor Keithley and all the team that were involved in making that happen, facilitate that, and also thank the officers for producing a comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody else want to read? Councillor Coles.
Right, customer access terminals. I will make these work, Councillor, because we could laugh at them and they're in a difficult place and all the rest of it. And I think it's a sort of universal truth that the smaller amount of money you spend, the harder it is to spend and get it working. I will take it away because I think it is easy to say, well, it's just why don't you get in your car debt? But this was addressing a specific need in two areas. And I think it's very important that when we do review it, it's not with a mind to shutting it down. It's with a mind to making it work and make sure it is addressing the need that was identified, which was why it was raised by some of our colleague councillors. I believe it was Councillor Rock, wasn't it? To ask if we could investigate and see if we can make it work. So I am very happy to look at that with a review, to check the need, but also to check that if it is needed, we continue to try and make it work and make it accessible for the people who need it, who it would be supporting.
Councillor Crump.
I think it underlines the value of how pertinent, how present that need is. That's in my county ward. The libraries, I'm often in the library and I meet the staff on a regular basis, and again I sense check how many people have gone in to be using the information. And I agree, I think there was that need prior to COVID, but once COVID happened, things have changed. People work more remotely, there's more technology available, and I felt that yes, if it had happened 5 years ago, I would have supported it wholeheartedly. I do think this scheme is spent a lot of officer time on it. Well, sorry, some officer time, I'll take that back and I apologise for that. Some officer time was spent on that and that may have been used elsewhere. So I do think this does need to be reviewed strongly and see if it's still fit for purpose in the current environment. Thank you.
Councillor Coles?
Yes, I do hear what you're saying, and many of us have and do and continue to work from home, but many, many people do not have that facility, don't have access to that technology, and I don't want to leave them behind if there is something that they can use that we can make sure is there and we can provide and they can use. And I think that would be the thrust of my review, is to make sure it is being targeted to the people who do not have that capacity, and we know that this is the case for many people.
Thank you indeed. And just to kind of, I went to a parish council meeting recently, and praise was given to the parish and town council liaison officer, and I think we need to get past that praise on. Councillor Passingham.
Thank you. There's an item of working with Warwickshire County Council to have commissioned a study exploring route options for a bypass to Stratford-on-Avon town as part of the preparation of the SWLP. We have discussed this a few times here, and I've always put forward that there is a very good option, which is reinstating the rail link to Longmarston and Honeybourne, and Councillor Coucher has agreed with me a couple of times that all options should be considered in relation to being able to build out Longmarston as a brownfield site. Most people would consider that reinstating the rail link will be more, will cost less money and be quicker to implement than a road bypass. So why is the rail link not one of the targets in this appendix?
This is a performance report on a particular particular part of the the performance of the district council. We're working in partnership with lots of other people as well. So this is not only this is just looking at what we're doing. But Councillor Coucher, I don't know if you're able to, but if we are to move forward, we're looking at all options.
As you said, Leader, this is a performance report in terms of where we're doing. We have an aim in terms of preparing the South Warwickshire local plan, and clearly we're looking at all transport options in relation to that. It's very important because, frankly, we will need government investment in this, that we actually do get it right, which is why we're putting so much attention into it.
Thank you very much indeed. We have a recommendation. Are you all happy? I'm happy to move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder, Councillor Coucher? Yeah. And are you all in agreement? Thank you very much indeed. The next item is an update on Warmington and Alscott Parish Plan update, page 219 to 330. And this Councillor Coucher.
We've already talked earlier on this morning about the importance of neighbourhood development plans. And I think this is a fantastic example of a small parish coming forward with a neighbourhood plan for their area. It's really important when you're considering planning proposals that you have got a really good evidence base in terms of decisions that are being made, and therefore NDPs are very important in relation to that. So I would want to congratulate Alscott and Warmington Parish for preparing this plan, which I think is a very robust document and something that we should support. So there is a recommendation here that we adopt the plan which they've prepared as a material consideration when determining planning applications in accordance with the core strategy policy as important source of local information.
Councillor Gish.
Just wanted to speak, Leader, because this sits in my ward. I want to thank all the residents who contributed to this update of the parish plan, and particularly Councillor Birstall, who up until last week was the chair of the parish council. And I think he's spent 25 years on the parish council. So there's not a drain or a tree in Warmington and Alscott he doesn't know about. And so I had two things I wanted to say to him. One is, I know where you live. And the other, I'm sure you'll all join me in wishing him a very happy birthday. He'll be 80 on Christmas Day.
Fantastic, I'm sure. Councillor, not Councillor, apologies. John Kerford, Head of Development.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note, so this is a parish plan, so perhaps slight slip of the tongue there, Councillor Coucher. This is not a neighbourhood plan. The difference being that neighbourhood plan is part of the statutory development plan for the district. This isn't, but it's still a really helpful document to inform planning applications, and the same effort, as Councillor Coucher said, goes into preparing it. So, well done to the parish, but just for that clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we accept the clarity, and it's always welcome when local people, volunteers, all volunteers, and particularly when somebody reaches at 8 years old, I really praise the input that is put by people, because they care about their community, they care about the future of their community, and we really thank you very much indeed for please give our best wishes. Okay. We have a recommendation, and that's been proposed by Councillor Coucher. You've proposed it? Yep, and I'm happy to... No, Councillor Gist would like to second it. Or even you could do it the other way around.
It's fine.
Are you all in agreement? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Moving on then to the... and this is where Councillor Coucher will leave the room, which is about the delivering local needs, local choice, rural housing, at page 331 to 352. And this is to consider an update from the Rural Housing Enabler on the Council's sustainable housing, sustainable homes, sustainable communities housing strategy, and to consider a 3-year renewal of the existing RHE contract to March 2029. Now, who's going to, Councillor Coles, are you going to take this forward?
Yes, thank you. In Councillor Coucher's absence. This has been an extremely successful programme. The Rural Housing Enabler has done exactly what it says on the tin, which is to work with the communities, create networks, identify land, support housing needs surveys, and to help deliver small developments of social housing in accordance and in partnership with the communities that these would be built in. I believe, and I forgot to check, but I believe we've already extended this contract. I think it's an extremely useful and productive and very positive support to our communities in the district. The recommendations that we continue with the existing approach, that the contract was renewed, and that the third party's exemption to the Council's contract standing orders be granted to allow the direct appointment of the Warwickshire Rural Community Councils to provide the rural housing enabling role. We've worked very happily with them with this role, but I think I have to just once again emphasise the importance of the work that the Rural Housing Enabler has done in delivering social housing in a small amount to communities and working well with those communities to smooth the path to get these done. And I would wholeheartedly support this recommendation.
I certainly know of the input she put into Great Holland in particular. It's not my ward, but just up the road from me, and a tremendous amount of support she gave to that parish council for doing their rural housing enabling role. Councillor Pemberton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I'm glad Councillor Coles and you both think this is a good initiative, as it was brought forward by a previous Conservative administration. It is an effective, so as Nike would say, just do it.
And Councillor Crump.
Yes, discussed at OSC again. Again, local enable, local choice, local. So again, we highlight the importance of local involvement, particularly the local parish councils having an active engagement with this. And I've sat in a very cold village hall next to the local enabler, chattering away. And that wasn't because we were talking, it was that cold in that room. So yeah, we think it's really important. And if we can highlight the role of the Rural Housing Enabler through the parish forum, that would be helpful in any of our magazines. And also the importance of local needs surveys. Again, we were talking about local plans, etc., parish plans and updates. So I think that's important. So if you can, one, highlight how important they are in terms of how the local village develops, particularly. So I think it's a very good scheme, 100% support it, and the officers received a positive response at OSC for all their hard work. So thank you for that, Councillor Coles.
I mean, often in many areas, this is the only way in which we can get genuinely affordable housing. It's not just so that's defined by the government legislation as being affordable. It's genuinely affordable. And in some of the cases, it's been passive house and much higher standard than would otherwise have been delivered in some of these areas. I certainly support it and have supported the idea in Ulster as well as in other areas. So I think we've got the recommendation before us, which is that the continuation of the existing approach is set out as for delivering homes for local people in rural parishes, and that the existing rural housing enabler contract is renewed for a period of 3 years, from April 2026 to March 2029 at a cost of £60,000 per annum, and that an exemption to the Council's contract standing orders be granted to allow direct appointment of Warwickshire Rural Community Council to provide the rural housing enabling role. Are you all in favour of that? Do you want to propose it, Councillor Coles? I will second that. And are you all in agreement? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on then, we've got issues arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Oh, Councillor, my apologies, it's getting a long morning. Yes, you can come back in again. I raised have a point of order from the monitoring officer, no?
No, it was just to ask about whether Councillor Goucher could come back in. He's here.
Of course he can come back in. No, we'll leave you outside forever. No. We've got issues arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Crump.
Just one very brief, but minor, brief thing, but important as well. I think when we're talking about the EV charging points, I think we need to make sure they are accessible to all users. And I know some of our users with disabilities do have challenges when using these charging points. So if that could be taken a note of, I think it's a pertinent point, and I'm sure it would be on there. But if we can make that explicit as part of the tender, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, this is something that I've raised many times, not only about accessibility for people with disabilities, but making sure that they're in safe places for women that are driving on their own, for example. I have sat at a charging point behind a garage in the dark with no CCTV waiting for my car to be parked up, to be charged up. So they've always got to be in nice, light, accessible places and safe places. So there's a lot that needs to be taken into account there. So thank you very much for raising that. Okay, Cabinet committees, none. On block items, I've had no requests made to me at the start of the meeting for any of those items to be discussed. So the Climate Change Panel, the Cash Management Working Group, and they are all accepted. And Part F, other matters, urgent business, I've had no notification of any urgent business. So in that case, I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.